good evening or good afternoon or good morning, wherever you may be on this flat plane. This is a final test with something quite trick, which is the ability to share Skype conversations whilst having a live broadcast without any interference, any feedback. So I've currently got with me, Anthony and Zoe. So if you guys can just say a quick hello. They're both camera shy at the moment.
Hello and good afternoon. Hope you're all.
I'm not camera shy. It's just I've only just got out of bed.
Yeah, me too.
Unlike Zoe, I'm not prepared to put it through. Oh, you got a right. I see. So you're doing what's it called? Audio repeater.
Exactly. So this program's called Voice Meter Banana, and it's a proper mixing desk for your PC. So I'm screen sharing at the moment, right? I hope I am on the broadcast. Let me just check. Yes, I am. Yeah. Okay. So if I do this just so the audience can see exactly what I'm explaining. Along the top, you've got A1, A2, and A3, and they're like analog outputs, and they correspond to A1, A2, and A3. And along the bottom, A1, A2, A3. And therefore, your physical outputs, like this one is my speakers, this one's the headphone preamplifier, and this one's the headphone jack on the PC. So they're physically what I can actually hear. Stop the mic falling over. Sorry if you're hearing crackling from me moving my mic. And then they're controllable here, so I can control what I'd hear in my headphones or what the speakers play out now. So that's the A's, right? Then you've got the B's, so B1 and B2, which correspond to my virtual outputs. Yeah. So B2 is the broadcast stream, which is this. Yeah. And what I've got it set so is that my mic, which is line 1, goes to B2, which is the broadcast. And you guys on Skype have just got direct access to the mic. So everything that comes through my computer will come through that, now that I've got it set with this new function that Skype has introduced, which is if you do desktop screen sharing with Skype and you've updated Skype in the last couple of days, it now shares your audio as well through Skype, which is great because it gives me a gate. So it means that I can still share the sound from Skype, which is my line 2 with a virtual audio cable. So Skype is going to my speakers so I can hear you and to the broadcast. But because you guys on Skype have got direct access to the mic, I might as well show that because this is recording. Whoops, mic about to fall off again. Sorry about this. This is a bit hodgepodge. Go on, stay up. So in Skype, my settings are set so that the microphone, you can probably just read that, is the Yeti microphone. So it's just direct access to the mic. And then inside Skype, the call itself, if I can get back to the call, sorry, I'm not that familiar with this new Skype software. Inside the call, which is here, it's allowing me to share all of my system sounds. So in other words, it's not directly sending your sound that you give me when you speak back to you. Does that make sense? Whereas if I ran it through this line 1, the sound would go to the broadcast, but also back to you, which is why when I tested earlier with Zoe, she constantly heard her own voice in a loop, feedback, in other words. But now that you've got direct access and Skype allows me to share system sounds, you could hear anyone who's on a call with me who joined the Hangout. Unfortunately, I'm not going to bother doing this now, but if I had another guest in this Hangout, you could actually hear him and he could hear you or she. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So
yes,
that's it. It means that I can actually have a proper conversation with someone on Skype during a Hangout. They can hear everybody who's in the Hangout. Everyone can hear them. It's perfect. It's a proper, fully functioning desk that works as it should. And this is something that on a PC, as far as I know, just unless you paid hundreds of pounds for it, wasn't available. This is free. And it's donationware. I paid I didn't pay. I donated $5 because I was so chuffed with it. That was the minimum. But there we go. I thought it was worth. If this was on the market for £20 or £30, I would buy it in a heartbeat. So I think it's an excellent piece of software. You can do other things. You can fiddle with your voice and make it sound a bit more echoey or a bit more high pass or a bit more low pass. So, it's just got cool stuff.
Very cool.
And hopefully when I play it back on the iPad in a minute when we stop this broadcast, everyone can actually hear you as I anticipate, but I'm pretty sure they can because I can see this level, which is the line out for the show, bouncing up and down when you guys talk.
Oh, I'm just realizing that I can manipulate the volume on. I'm obviously I'm column 2, aren't I? So if I turn my mic down, that level drops right off. Go left with your mouse. Keep going left. Yeah, that one there. If I turn it right the way down, watch. And then if I turn it right the way up, you see it interacts with me.
Yeah, so you've got control of your own level through Skype, and then that comes through the desk. I could then boost you up if you were super quiet or whatever. This is the best feature on here, and I will say this on this broadcast, but this is a little background filter. I don't know if you'd call it a gate. I think it's called a gate. But basically, if I go quiet in a second, although there's birds chirping, which might ruin this, but if I ask you to not to say anything, dead air is what we want here. When I stop talking, you'll see that this will drop to 0 and you won't hear any background noise. Hopefully it'll cut out the sound of the birds. We'll see. So when I talk, it then comes back in. Whereas if I take off the gates, so turn them to 0, there's 0. Now you should see a constant level of background noise.
Yeah.
So that's a constant little background interference that if you were on Google, that would be enough to cut the mic across to me and cause feedback as it picks up my stereo volume. Whereas with a little tiny gate on there, it means that when I'm playing stuff through the audio on my system, and I learned this from Humanistory, it means that you don't have to have headphones. You can have your background speakers actually playing the audio. And when I stop talking, it'll cut it off enough, so long as I turn the stereo down enough, and it won't pick it up on that little level of background audio that you saw.
This is where I'm a little bit confused, because for some reason when I use my Yeti, and I notice it with your Yeti, you do it on the couch, and your Yeti doesn't pick up the speaker noise that comes out the speakers. Neither does my Yeti. So why do you need to use headphones?
Oh, it will. I mean, mine doesn't pick up the sound because I've got it positioned such. That was the first thing I did when I got the Yeti. I mean, at first it was so horrendous that I was boxing the thing around with like a little anechoic chamber, like half anechoic chamber around the thing. And while it sounded wonderful, occasionally I'd knock it and the whole thing would collapse. And, I've got half the paint missing off the front of the microphone from where it slid off, with all this sort of hodgepodge, like fortress around it. And the only reason I did that was to stop it picking up the sound from the mic. And you can ask any of my guests before I go live, before I start actually muting in between my guests talking. If I don't do that, they will hear feedback, absolutely without question. It just depends on how loud it is. It might.
I don't get that on mine. Mine's very, very good. It's peculiar.
Maybe. I mean, I've got you gated on. I've got the Skype callers gated, if you want to call it that. The Skype part of my guests now are also gated, just slightly less, so that, as you can see, when you're not talking, even if Skype doesn't gate it enough and cut off the background noise, I'm gating you a little bit as well. So that could have something to do with it. But it just luck, because I certainly didn't find that. It definitely picked up everything, and still does to this day, even with it positioned well. So yeah, that's about it. I think I've pretty much explained my audio settings now that I've actually got them to work, and I'm dead chuffed. The only other thing I didn't explain was this particular part, which was the second virtual audio cable. So this bit is now Google Plus. So the Hangout itself runs through that channel, and the reason is so that, again, I can isolate the mic. So it's the opposite way round to my mic. So my mic goes out to the broadcast on B2, but the Google sound only comes to me locally. So it doesn't go out to the broadcast, because Google Plus is the broadcast software itself. So obviously anything that someone says on their end will go into the Google software and still be broadcast out. I only need to worry about what comes from me locally, like my sound, my Skype, or if I was to play a song or something like that. But the last thing I need is that your sound, if you were a guest in Google Plus, was to go through this channel B2, which it would do if I didn't have a mixing desk. And it'd mean that, like with Zoe earlier, she got a constantly loop of her own voice when she spoke. That would be the same principle if I didn't have a second virtual audio cable for G+. So it's the way this system works, as I now understand, it didn't 4 days ago, is that for any piece of software that you want to isolate, you have to tell the computer that it's like having a separate CD player running into the computer, so you can see it as a separate line. So I've now got G+ is a separate input, but you have to have a virtual audio cable assigned to it in order to do that. So inside G+, if I go into settings, again, I may as well show this just so it's on this broadcast for anybody who comes back to use this as a tutorial. Inside settings, I've got virtual input cable A is set up to my sound. So anything that comes out sound of Google Plus goes into this desk, but not back out to the broadcast because it's unnecessary. Google Plus will do that anyway of its own accord for anybody who's at the other end, in the same way as I wouldn't need to feed their sound back. It's only my mic that needs to go into G Plus. But I also want my mic and any video I play and any guest on Skype. But I don't want any of my guests or my guests on Skype to hear themselves or me hear my own mic, things like that. So there you go. Cool as frig. Very skookum.
It is. Well, on a slightly different note, I've got some evidence that might change things a little bit. I've got some very persuasive evidence that there may be a little bit of curve. It's not curve that would be consistent with the 24,970 mile circumference, but it's definitely persuasive evidence that it could be curved, but to a much less extent. In other words, it's a lot bigger than they tell us it is, which is why people are struggling to identify any amounts of curve. But it's definitely persuasive in terms of it's my own interpretation is that's not consistent with it being flat. It's definitely consistent with it being curved.
So this has turned into breaking news. You found some curvature. Are you essentially going to illustrate the same thing that Matrix did?
Hey, Baba.
No. It's not like that. It's not like that. What it is, obviously, I'm up at St. Bede's at the minute, and I'm up here for a couple of days away, just to get away. And I've come up here with the flat Earth intent of trying to observe Blackpool Tower from 52 miles away. But the weather's not been great at the moment. It's on the turn up now. We're on the turn up to getting some good weather. But whilst I was here, I've noticed that I can see land masses in the background, and the land masses I can see are that far away that although I can see them with the naked eye, as far as I can tell, I need to identify which land this is. But you shouldn't be able to see it behind the curve of the Earth because it's very, very flat, and you shouldn't see it. But I need to identify exactly which land it is because it's not that easy because it's so far away. But there's a big slope, and I can change my elevation in maybe 25 steps from probably, I don't know, sea level up to maybe 25 feet in a really quick, short movement. And it doesn't converge on the horizon into a thin line. It disappears. Now, if it was a flat plane, I would expect it to still be there, just converged and squashed and like a thin black line where the land is converged. But it does actually disappear behind something, which tells me or indicates persuasively enough for me to think that might be curved. But it's miles bigger than what they're telling us, which is what I've always thought. I've always considered the possibility that it may well be a ball, but it's just massive compared to what they tell us. It's like the size of Jupiter rather than the size of the Earth. So I've got to do a little bit of work on it yet, and I can't get the footage off because I've not got a laptop to be able to put it on. But it's going to be coming out in the next couple of days, and I'm going to put it out there and ask for interpretations on it because it does look like it's curved, but it's miles bigger than what they tell us. So I'm not going to make the rash statement that it's curvature, but I'm going to ask how could it be explained on a flat plane when it actually disappears. It doesn't like converge on the horizon. It actually goes. I'm like, ooh, this is interesting. So it's against the flat Earth model itself, but it's not in favor of heliocentricity either because it's a lot bigger than what they tell us it is if it is curved. So it's kind of like neither one nor the other.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Mm-hmm. Watch this space. So what have you actually photographed then? Because I know what you were trying to. I want you to detail what you've told me to the audience because we've got an audience now.
There's three peninsulas of land, one behind the other. Now on Google Maps, it looks like I can see the three, and it looks like the third one, the one that's furthest away. That one is the one that looks like it's where I'm supposed to be looking at. But the visibility has not been great, so the opacity of the atmosphere itself, the moisture, it's basically cloud. You're looking through liquid. It's not been kind in the last couple of days, so I've not got the weather yet to see what I wanted to see. But this morning the weather's allowed me to see what I want to look at, and I could see that the third peninsula of land, which I believe to be Blackpool area, was disappearing as I was dropping down the ramp that takes me onto the beach. Now the ramp's really steep, so you can change your elevation really quickly in a short amount of steps. So I can do probably 25 or 30 feet in maybe 20 steps. So I can get up very quickly, and that allows me to see this third peninsula of land. It literally allows it to disappear. Now that's not consistent with what I would argue in favour of a flat Earth, because if it was a flat Earth, I would argue that it would converge, and it would be a thin line on the horizon. It wouldn't be disappearing, and it definitely is disappearing. I've got it on camera, so it's like, right, this is needs to be put out there for interpretations, because I don't see how this could be explained if it was a flat plane. It's not consistent with it being a ball, or if it is consistent with it being a ball, the ball's got a diameter, a circumference of much more than 24,970, but it's definitely not consistent with it being a flat plane unless there's another explanation for it either. So at the moment, I'm thinking maybe it's actually a ball, but maybe it's like 10 times bigger than what they're telling us, or 5 times bigger than what they're telling us, which means there would be more land. Because obviously, if it was 3 or 4, 5, 6, 7 times bigger, then that's a shitload more land that we don't know exists, which is possible. But it would also make sense because it would also explain why.
I was just going to say, it'd also mean you have to go back to the ideas were you to concede or find that the explanation given is consistent with the sphere, that you have to go back to accepting having Australians antipode to you. I know what you're saying, and it would put Australia on the same plane as us in a subtler way.
Well, it would also for me explain why the gyroscope fails to record any rotation, because we know that they're sensitive enough to be able to do it, but they don't do it. So it's like, well, maybe we are on a ball, but it ain't moving, or it is moving such a small amount that a gyroscope can't pick it up. But it's not because we're moving such a small amount; it's because they're a lot bigger than they're telling us we are. So I'm not saying for absolutes. I'm not saying anything certain at the minute. All I'm going to do is say this is what I've been able to observe. You can clearly see that it disappears behind something. Now, what that is a $1 million question. But I'm not saying it's the curve of the Earth, but it's certainly persuasive to make me think that it could be. But if it is, it's not consistent with what the heliocentric model is of a circumference of 24,900. But I have done.
It's when you say not consistent with the heliocentric model. Again, if we're on a massive ball, then the star trails argument for the heliocentrists makes absolutely no sense at all.
Agreed. It's out the window, and that would make more sense in terms of what the southern star rotation point would be. It would make it just that it's a swirl in the sky in the same way that I said this last night on a hang. I said, like, why do we call it the North Star, the North Pole rotation point? Because if you use the word pole, it indicates that that's the top pole and you've got a bottom pole. But maybe it's just the fact that the stars are in a matrix in the sky that they tell us is rotation points, and it's the curvature of the Earth and all that. But actually, it's not. It's just 2 rotation points in the sky, like the blades of a Chinook. I've heard that comment so many times, and I've always thought maybe not. I don't know. But I don't know. I mean, but it would explain
the other thing
to me.
That you argued, which I thought was quite genius, was the naming. Polaris means pole star, correct? So to argue that it's moved when its name, based on the timings, it's impossible for him to name it pole star if it's not the pole star.
Yeah, and there's other things as well that are inconsistent with. I mean, the reality is, I've got some evidence now that I think that is persuasive enough for me to consider the possibility that there's curve. But if I do consider the possibility that there's curve, it's massive. It's way bigger than 24,000, because this is what's weird. I've done plenty of observations myself, and I always get results that are ambiguous. And when you get ambiguous results in terms of they neither help or persuade against either model, it looks like it's either an anomaly or it's just shit settings. I've always got that evidence, and I've thought, well, it's neither one nor the other. Therefore, it's anomalous. It's an anomalous. Therefore, discard it on that basis. But when I've been discarding the evidence that neither fits one nor the other, I've always had in the back of my mind the thought that possibly that it could be that it's a ball, but it's just a lot bigger than what they tell us, which means that gravity comes back into it in some way, and it means that centrifugal forces and centripetal forces may well come back into it. But I've never ruled out the possibility that it's just a lot bigger than what they tell us, meaning that there is more land out there. So it's just interesting that I've seen this morning. I wasn't even looking for it, but I saw it, and I said to the missus, I said, "What do you think of that?" And she went, "That's not consistent with it being flat, is it?" And I said, "Nay, not at all, because I would expect it to still be there on the horizon, but converged. It's not getting any further away. It's not getting any closer. It should just compress as you change your altitude, but it was definitely disappearing. You could see it at the top of the ramp. You could see it, and you could see the peaks and the troughs of it, even though it was relatively flat. You could see the chunks, but then by the bottom, as you were walking down the ramp, because it's a steep ramp and you can see it change before your very eyes, I was like, get that on camera, because she got it on camera. I said, "Did you actually get it?" And she, yeah, it's there. Checked it, and it's there. You can see it. It's there 1 minute, and as you're walking down, it gradually gets cut off. And I'm like, ooh, that's interesting. And I'm looking. I'm gonna have to work out what land it is I'm looking at, because it's difficult to even interpret it based on Google Earth, because it looks like what I'm looking at is Blackpool area, but according to what I was seeing there before, maybe it's actually not. And I'm gonna have to recalibrate where my spidey senses are. But that'll, I think I might have to wait until I get back on Saturday night before I can put it all together into a video, because I've not got the ability to do it here whilst I'm away on a short break.
Described, though, Anthony, I mean, is it not consistent with light actually bending if it's doing that?
For the light to bend, it means that there has to be a curve, doesn't it?
No, not at all. I mean, you've seen the sugar water experiments in the tank, right?
Well, yeah.
Well, therefore, light could bend. I mean, what I'm saying is, I don't know if you're very quickly attributing it to curvature.
No, I'm not. I'm not saying it is. I'm just saying it could be. It's persuasive. That's all I'm saying. It's persuasive, and I want to know. I want to discuss it because it is something that goes against what I was expecting to see when I got here. And I thought, I mean, you know how we all get accused of cherry picking our arguments, and I thought, no, I'm not going to cherry pick this because I could ignore it. I could turn a blind eye, but I actually want to know what the truth is. So I want to see, well, if this is flat, how's it explained? If it is a curve, the only explanation is it's massive. It's way bigger than what they tell us. So it can be either. It can be either evidentially, and on its own one case merit. It doesn't. What I'm going to try and do is get it more than once. Get it again. Like in a couple of hours' time when the weather conditions change, because it could be some kind of weird atmospheric effect and it was a fluke. So, but whilst I'm here, I'm going to go back a couple of times in the next few hours and see if I can recapture the exact same footage, but in slightly different weather conditions, to rule out weather being something that's influencing it. Because it could be bendy light, it could be lensing, it could be looming, it could be a whole host of things, to be honest. But I'll try and get the same footage more than once, and then I'll just discuss it on a hang, and I'll just say, I'll just get the flatties in, and we'll just get flatties in, and we'll talk about it, and we'll say how could this be interpreted if it were flat, and then I'll bring a couple of ballers in, and obviously they'll say, yeah, it's curved, dickhead. But it's massive though. If it is curved, it's a lot bigger than what they tell us, and it goes against the heliocentric model in any event because it's so far away. So I'm a bit confused by it. So, but it's interesting because whichever, it doesn't really support either model because they both seem to be wrong. But I'll have to do it more than once to make sure that it's not just a fluke atmospheric situation that really I've spent time on and I shouldn't be spending time on. But it's just interesting. It's not one nor the other, but it needs to be explained because it does persuade me that it might be actually curved, but it's just massive compared to what they tell us.
Again, I come back to, if that's the case, just living on a sphere, regardless of its size, seems impossible to me. I know I'm not trying to get you to play devil's advocate and go into the heliocentric arguments for living on a sphere, but the idea of having somebody antipode to me on the bottom of a sphere, even if it's in a different, there's another 25 rings of ice, don't get on my case in the comments about this. I'm just theorizing. So if you're saying there's us, Australia here, us here, South America there, then over here you've got another ring, but you've got all of the concepts of gravity. That would mean that eventually you get to a point when there's another realm, whatever you want to call it, underneath, with people physically stuck to the bottom of it.
Agreed, but it also introduces the possibility that there must be another sun to warm up whatever land we're on. If it does have a very shallow curve to it and it goes beyond 24,000 miles in circumference, it also means that there has to be a Nibiru in some respect. Otherwise, the rest of the land that it must exist would be covered in ice. It would be Antarctica, and it would be exactly the way Admiral Byrd described it, as fucking massive. So there would have to be another sun unless it's pure ice. So Nibiru may well end up being some kind of element of truth to it. But I don't know. I'm just thinking about it at the moment because it's evidence that doesn't support either. It's definitely in the middle ground, but there shouldn't be a middle ground. There is no middle ground. It's either flat or ball, and nobody considers the possibility that it's a ball, but it's much bigger.
Very interesting.
By the way, I haven't turned against flat Earth in any way by that. It's just evidence that it's not consistent with either model, and I want to know what it actually is that I'm looking at, because it was like, what? That's not what I was expecting to see. But again, like I said, I've done loads of observations where I've had inconclusive or anomalous results, and I've always thought, yeah, it doesn't support either that, so it must therefore be wrong, and dismissed it on the grounds of, well, it doesn't go with either model. But as over time, these evidences start to rack up and you notice it and you think, actually, maybe it is a ball, but it's just massive. And it was one of the first videos I ever did, because I went out to test the math. 8 inches per mile squared must be wrong. It's on my channel. It's about 12 months old. And that was the conclusion I came back with. The maths must be wrong. Didn't mean that we didn't live on a ball, or didn't mean that we were living on a flat, but it definitely didn't match up with what we were expecting to see. And I was like, oh, that's a little bit weird. So when I get back on Sunday, or well, it'll be Saturday night, I might do a live hang on Saturday night, just purely to discuss this evidence, because it kind of, like I say, it doesn't go with one or the other. It's kind of a middle ground, but no one's ever really considered the possibility that there might be a middle middle ground. But if there is a middle ground, then the stars come into question because the southern rotation point, like you say, wouldn't match at all. It's just interesting. It's going to open a whole can of worms possibly, because it might just be an atmospheric thing and it was just a fluke. Because as we know, the atmosphere can really fuck with what we see. And if we do see stuff that is inconsistent and it is down to the atmosphere, it's just a normalist by virtue of the atmosphere.
You've got to look at this stuff though to discount it completely or explain it. So, did you have any comments, Zoe? You've been very quiet.
Oh, I've just been muting myself because the dogs have been barking. So, but yeah, I would say pretty much the same as you, Nathan. That no matter how big the ball is, it's not possible. But interesting.
Oh no, I am leaning more towards that. It doesn't mean it's possible. Then I mean, have you ever heard anybody discussing the possibility that it is just a bigger ball than what they're telling us, and there is more land? Like Bird says, there is more land beyond Antarctica.
Yeah, sure. Well, I've heard that explanation, but it's just, I'm not saying that I'm looking for confirmation bias. That's not what I'm trying to get to. I'm trying to get to the point where it's clear that you've got to find these things, because we need to, at some stage, explain the path that has led people to this mass delusion of heliocentrism. That's what we need. And things that you have found, be it an anomaly or whatever it is at this stage, once explained, and I mean no doubt whatsoever that it will eventually have a proper, coherent, verifiable explanation, it's another marker on the road that says this is how the conclusion, the wrong conclusion, was drawn, that we live on a giant spinning ball. And that's why when I'm trying to say, look, Brian Cox isn't necessarily a liar, because when you do have anomalies like you've just found, it's wonderful to see, because it can give us a more coherent story. Because that's how people, they don't want to just know that they've just been lied to and deceived, because people find that very difficult. But if you can give them a really cogent explanation for how that has happened, people feel a lot less stupid for having been fooled or mistaken.
Yeah. Good point. Yeah.
Can I do one last thing? Because I'm going to try and keep this relatively short. My wife's back for a lunch break and I'm going to say my hellos to her. But I want to check now that this started off as a test. I know it's turned into quite a good show for anyone who's actually watching. But I want to play out a video that's got audio just to check that you guys can hear it and so on and so forth. Feel free to talk over it so that I can check on the levels that you can still be heard in the Hangout if a video is playing and things like that. But I want to check that you can actually hear it and be heard by me and the audience, and they can hear the video. So
if you're taking suggestions for a video to play, you could play the one that Sean Hufford did last night, where he actually apologised for calling me a pathological liar, and he actually made a mistake. That'd be nice to hear again.
I think you mentioning it, Anthony. I think you mentioning it is probably sufficient. But well done. You got an apology. Right. Okay. Yeah. I'm gonna play this video out, so hopefully everyone can hear it.
No, I'm not hearing it.
We can't hear
it. Okay, that's not a good start then.
Is it because your input at A1, A2, A3 needs changing?
No, I don't think so. I'll give up there because it'll be something simple, because I have had that. That was the first bit I got working. So,
hang on, is it not muted in the actual window that you're playing it from?
Oh, the volume on it is not muted. No, I don't think so. Let's just check. Don't want this to turn into a very boring. No, it's not muted. That's frustrating.
So you just need to find the
input, reset it.
What it is, Nathan, if you're looking for the stereo mixer, aren't you, for Windows to play that from?
Yeah, it's not that. I don't know what it is, but I will figure it out. I think it could be because I'm sharing it with you through Skype. Maybe that's taken control of it, but I should still hear it. But there we go. I'll figure that bit out. That's going to be a simple fix. But and
obviously now that if you do sort this out and work it out, you're going to have to give everybody tutorials on how it works.
Yeah, I will do for certain. Right, guys. Well, unless there's anything you're going to add, I'm going to end it there. Is there anything you two wanted to add before I do?
No, not really. Other than have a wonderful day on the flat plane.
Or maybe not so flat after all, but maybe we'll see. Nothing to add specifically.
Not the flat plane.
Watch this space. I'm sure we'll get an answer from you in the next couple of days. I will give one last plug to a show that I'll be doing on Saturday. I'm not 100% sure what time yet, but basically I'm going to be tying up exactly where and when we'll be meeting. So we're going to hold a Flat Earth UK mixer, probably in the next month or two, maybe sooner, we shall see. But I'll let you guys know show, and we'll talk about it and tell you when the times and dates will be on that show on Saturday. So I'll do, maybe it's Friday today, right? I might do a land, I might not, or I'll just fire up the Hangout like I've done with this one. And a few people have asked for links, but I might just ask them to call me in on Skype, as I can do this. Why not?
Well, just my own 2 pence worth on that. It kind of makes sense to do it on a geographically central position, kind of like Stoke way, because that's kind of like halfway up the country.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Maybe Stoke or Stafford way or something like that.
Stoke or Stafford way on a big hill. That's what we've got so far.
Yeah.
Although I'm pretty central, it might be. I mean, Leamington Spa's literally the most central point in the country. There's the oak that's down the road from me is called the Midland Oak, and it marks the centre of England.
Yeah, but I know, but how many people are actually really far up north? Like, like in the top part of Scotland, there's not that many people there, is there?
No.
So maybe being a bit further south is right, yeah.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. This is something we'll discuss on Saturday. So join me,
worries.
Nathan Oakley, maybe Anthony Riley. Zoe, you've said you want to come as well, so hopefully you'll be involved in the Hangout too.
Yes, I hope so. I'll have to get my passport made. So.
Indeed you will.
Yeah.
And to all of you who have joined us in the live chat, if I can get you back up, I'll say thank you to you.
Goodbye.
Let's do that. Yeah, so Zulu 1, I see you, Flatter, 4 Eyes to See. Everybody who's in the chat, thank you very much indeed for joining us on this impromptu live broadcast. I've been Nathan Oakley. I'll see you all in the next video.